Hello, you're on the channel Infidelity and Revenge. If you haven't subscribed yet, you can do it right now. Enjoy watching. An absolute, undiluted hell. The last few hours for Joel Barton have consisted of nothing but pain and disbelief. The anonymous email said that his beloved wife of 6 years, Whitney, had been seen entering a cheap motel room the previous Wednesday afternoon, and that she was now dining with the same man again. To say Joel was shocked would be a gross understatement. He and Whitney were deeply in love, had sex 3 or 5 times a week, and their lovemaking was usually intense and sincere. He was not yet 30, and he thought their lovemaking was vigorous and satisfying for each of them. Nevertheless, he couldn't ignore the email or its aftermath. So, feeling as tense and uptight as he had ever felt in his life, he drove home that day already a changed man. Arriving home around 1800 hours, as usual, he saw Whitney's car already in the driveway. Still in her work clothes, she was standing at the sink, rinsing vegetables, when he walked into the kitchen, hesitantly said hello, and set down his briefcase. "Hi, honey, how was your day?" Whitney wiped her hands with a towel before turning to kiss him. Joel was amazed at how nonchalant Whitney was after spending the day with another man. "Great. But there was some bad news this afternoon related to a project we're working on, and it looks like I'll have to go to Lexington on Friday, so I won't be home until 2000 hours depending on how the meetings go, and then I'll just drive home." Joel knew Whitney's work schedule pretty well, and he knew that schedule was most flexible on Wednesday and Friday afternoons, so his first thought on how to check the allegations in this email was to make it even easier for Whitney this coming Friday. The project crisis, the meeting, and the business trip were all lies, and instead he arranged to take Friday off and do some preliminary work and look after the motel for Whitney and her lover. "Well, at least you don't have to stay the night, and we'll still spend the whole weekend together," Whitney suggested. "Since you can't really predict when you're coming home, could you call me when you leave Lexington? I'll try my best to get ready for dinner." Joel gave it some thought. Yesterday he would not have paid attention, or even thought, to how attentive Whitney had been in trying to make dinner together possible, despite his unplanned business trip. Now he wondered if she had asked him for a 2-hour period to cover her legs and remove the traces of her lover from her treacherous, promiscuous cunt. "Sure, I'll call you when I have a better idea of when I can leave Lexington, and I'll also call you from the road when I figure out what time I'll be home." "All right." Since the point of Friday was now to make it easier for Whitney to cheat again, if it really was her at the motel, and if that email was accurate, Joel wanted Whitney to feel comfortable knowing that he wouldn't have a chance to catch her. "Joel, I'm going to make dinner and then take a quick shower. Could you keep an eye on this pan while I'm gone? Make sure the vegetables don't burn," Whitney asked as she picked up her purse and carried it upstairs. "Of course, dear, don't worry," Joel replied, meanwhile thinking to himself, "Strange, I thought she usually left her purse downstairs." The shower itself got him thinking, too. While not uncommon, she didn't usually shower right after she got home, so as he looked through the mail and stirred the vegetables, he nervously wondered if the occasional shower was related to the news in the email he'd received earlier. To hell with my life, Joel thought, one anonymous email and I'm questioning everything about my marriage that, until today, I thought was absolutely wonderful. At dinner, Joel was clearly brooding. "Is there anything else wrong, honey? Besides the project you were talking about? You seem awfully quiet and almost on another planet," Whitney finally asked, getting a condensed answer to the couple of questions she was asking. "No, I'm sorry. I guess I'm just tired and also already thinking about what I need to do tomorrow to be ready to go to Lexington on Friday." Joel was aware that he needed to act normal so as not to make Whitney think something was out of the ordinary. Joel found it almost amusing. What counts as normal now? My wife could be cheating on me, or I could be poked by someone with a shitty sense of humor, or I could be the unintentional victim of a wrong email address. What if it was a completely different woman and the sender mistook her for my wife? To hell with that. Yesterday I was sure of my happiness, and today I'm a fucking wreck of a doubt. Dinner was cleaned up, and after watching a little TV, Joel and Whitney talked about plans for the weekend and finally started getting ready for bed. Joel had already said that he was going to bed early, since he had to go to work early to get ready for his trip. Joel's stomach twisted in a knot at the thought of what he would do if Whitney made any moves about sex tonight. He thought about Wednesday nights and whether there had been any pattern to their sex lately, and was horrified to realize that, from his recollection, it had been about 50-50. Linking it to her shower after work, he felt in the dark, trying to pin the tail on the two-faced donkey. Whitney got into bed first, and when Joel joined her, she quickly snuggled up behind him, hugged him tightly, and reached up to scratch his chest with her nails. "Can I take you away from your work for 30 minutes, my love?" Whitney playfully suggested. "Shit," thought Joel. "How much more could I take before I lost my temper?" He patiently stuck to plan A and said, "As much as I'd like that, honey, I'm not going to do you much good today or tomorrow. I'm just too distracted by this project hanging over me." Saying this, again he could not believe how much his life had changed in the 60 seconds it took him to read and understand this simple email he had received just 10 hours earlier. "It's okay, honey, I understand. I just thought, if you're up for it, I'd offer you some well-deserved stress relief." Whitney hugged Joel tightly and kissed the back of his neck before saying good night and rolling over on her other side. Joel was relieved, and at the same time. What did she mean by, "if you're up for it"? To hell with my life. Joel got up and left for work before Whitney woke up, so he dodged any further questions or penetrating glances. He realized how poorly he had handled the problem, real or imagined. Last night reminded him of Poe's betrayed heart, and, realizing this, he realized that he must avoid another night of close contact with Whitney. "Hi, honey, I'm going to be working late tonight getting ready for tomorrow's trip and meetings, so don't worry about dinner for me, and I'll see you probably before bed," Joel left on her voicemail around noon. Thursday, however, was spent unprepared for business meetings. Joel was a planner and organizer by nature and by profession, so although he had no hard facts about her infidelity, he wanted to organize everything. He called around until he found a lawyer who could meet with him the next day, and he searched the internet for recording devices. After deciding what he wanted to buy, he looked around town for any local stores with similar devices and found a store where he would stop by before he went home. Joel was competent enough in his real job that no one would ask him what was going on, but his heart and mind were clearly somewhere else. He was a little late getting off work, and then he went into a store with eavesdropping equipment and bought a simple voice-activated pen, which he thought he could hide in Whitney's purse, which was usually with her in her office and in the car. He also brought the work home to pretend he was getting ready for the next day's trip before Whitney went to bed. "Hi, honey. I'm so glad you're finally home," Whitney said, walking to the door when Joel arrived around 2100 hours. "How's the project and the trip going?" "I think it's pretty good. Since we found out about these new problems, we've devoted more resources to it, so I'm hoping it will be resolved on Friday, for better or for worse." This is playing with fire, Joel pondered. For better or for worse. I wonder if she feels the same way now. Thursday night, to Joel's relief, was a repeat of the night before, only with a hug. To her credit, Whitney seemed perfectly unperturbed and, as far as Joel could tell, acted the same way toward him as she had before. Conventionally speaking, however, he was such a complete wreck that it probably wasn't hard for Whitney to seem normal compared to Joel. On Friday, rising again at dawn, Joel checked his pen, put it in Whitney's purse, and left the house. He killed some time in the coffee shop and then went to meet the lawyer at 10 a.m. Joel considered this meeting purely to get information, but he ended up really liking the lawyer. They discussed Joel's email and his still unconfirmed concerns, and the fact that today was a date with a potential lover, which Joel was going to check out for himself. He admitted that he had nothing but that damned email, so going VA bank on a private investigator or thousands of dollars of electronic surveillance equipment didn't make much sense. From the lawyer, Joel learned about the shambolic reality of divorce, for that matter. Without children, a no-fault divorce was relatively easy, especially since Joel and Whitney earned comparable salaries and had similar retirement plan balances. The house was mostly in debt, so liquidating it would have been more of an emotional turmoil than a financial strain. Joel, however, left the law firm in utter confusion. How could I even feel this nightmare and think it wouldn't be so bad? We were supposed to be together forever until death do us part. Joel spent his lunch hour in a coffee shop surfing the internet and continuing to learn the procedure for what is called divorce. Websites abounded with information on how to spot a cheating spouse, as well as how to avoid detection when cheating, how to hide income, and how to find it. The most enlightening sites were those devoted to why spouses cheat. None of what Joel read touched a chord with Whitney's motivation. That fact alone was probably the reason why Joel hoped deep down that it was all a mistake. Whitney couldn't cheat on him. They were too close, too much in love, too in sync with each other for that to be true. When he could talk no more on the subject of cheating, he packed his things and left, heading for the motel. Time dragged on slowly, or so it seemed to Joel. As he drove to the motel mentioned in that damned email, he realized that if this whole affair story really was true, then it was quite possible that Whitney didn't always use the same motel. If it were true, then all of today might have been for nothing, and he still wouldn't know anything for sure. The pen he had put in her purse might eventually bear some fruit, but Joel knew he could no longer bear this uncertainty about the state and future of his marriage. Pulling into the motel parking lot at 1340, he drove around until he found a remote parking spot that overlooked most of the rooms and the office. Now he would just have to wait. There weren't many people in and out of the motel, so when the man parked his latest model Acura, visited the office, and then entered the room on the first floor, he seemed vaguely familiar to Joel. No name came to mind, but Joel thought he had seen this man before. All Joel's doubts ceased, as did his hopes, about 5 minutes later, when Whitney's Honda Accord parked next to the Acura, and she jumped out with her purse in her hand, walked to the door of the same room, and knocked quickly. A few seconds later a man opened the door, and Whitney stepped inside with her usual ease and confidence. Damn! It's all true, thought Joel, pounding his fists on the steering wheel. How could Whitney do this to us? And why? It just didn't make any sense or reason. Joel had never felt so blind in his life. The planner and organizer had just pulled the rug out from under him. Joel's thoughts flitted left, right, up and down like a roller coaster, and he suddenly realized that he now shared a crumbling stake in a marriage in complete and terrible crisis. Knowing that today was at least Whitney's second case of cheating, and that she was ducking out of work to do it, made Joel feel that there was nothing more to be gained by hanging around the motel. He wasn't going to confront them by knocking on the door. It could get ugly, and he needed time and space to calm down and prepare for whatever his next moves were. His disbelief up to this point had left him sadly unprepared emotionally for his next steps. Then he remembered the pen he had put in her purse and grimaced bitterly. Real-time sound, he thought painfully. This is just great. He had the presence of mind to take a few pictures of the two cars parked side by side in front of their love nest, and he took a close-up of the man's car with the license plate on it before he slowly turned to the exit and back onto the road. He didn't have a destination in mind, but for a while he just drove aimlessly until he almost ran a red light and almost got hit. This one shook him, so he stopped at a brewery and drank a beer, trying to gather his thoughts. At first he thought he had just gone from idle suspicion to full awareness, but he realized how little he knew at this point. And he had no idea who this guy was, how long this had been going on, and, more importantly, why. For all he knew, for 7+ years he and Whitney had been exclusive, engaged, and then married. He had enough evidence to confront it, but not enough to know if what Whitney answered would be true. As much as it pained him to listen to the tape of this afternoon's date, he knew he had to wait to get a pen out of her purse before he would say anything to Whitney. He also knew he couldn't be around Whitney, in love, if she was in the mood to have sex with him later, after his supposed business trip. He had been pushing her away this week, citing the trip, so his ready excuse would disappear, and further refusing to have sex with Whitney would likely raise her awareness that something was going wrong. So, what to do? I need that pen, then I need to quickly confirm that there's something on it, and then I could get out of the house and stay for a few days to figure out where I was in all this crap, Joel sketched out in his mind. With that general plan in mind, Joel had a sneaky thought: she thinks I'll be arriving later than usual tonight. In order for me to shake her and her lover, I need to call with the news that I'm almost home. After finishing his beer and paying the bill, he drove the car back onto the road and dialed Whitney's cell phone number. He texted a voice message. "Hi honey, great news. The prep work has paid off big time, and everyone has done a great job getting things back on track, so I'm about 30 minutes from Louisville, and the traffic isn't too bad. I should be home around the usual time. I hope this scares the shit out of her, you fucking tramp," Joel said aloud to himself. He headed for home, and when he arrived he quickly packed a couple of bags and put them in the trunk of his car. Then he sat down and wrote a note to Whitney. Depending on how the night went, he wanted to be able to just get away without much confrontation. He didn't know what was on the tape, so he didn't want a full-scale confrontation just yet. Part of his reasoning was also to daze her to the same degree that she had dazed him. When Joel called Whitney, she and her lover Rob were in the final throes of their second coitus that day. Today was their last day together, and thanks to the extra runway provided to them by Joel's trip, they were making their first second lap. They had also seen it as a celebration or victory dance, but now it seemed a potentially imprudent move. Listening to the voicemail message, she muttered, "Shit. I need to move, Rob." It was Joel, saying he was on his way back and would be home around 1800 hours, as usual. "Well, at least you got the early warning phone call he promised you," Rob joked back as Whitney hugged him and said goodbye, then quickly ran to the bathroom to take a shower. Routine and habit took over. Rob got dressed and left the room while Whitney took a shower. He was on his way to the gym for his standard workout after intercourse and a shower. On the way home, Whitney was more concerned about Joel's early return home and his joyful mood about the project changing for the better. "I thought he'd come home late and probably burned out from meetings and trips, but he'd probably want to make love tonight after missing most of the week," she thought, turning into their neighborhood. Still a little nervous, she turned the corner, approached her house, and saw Joel's car already in the driveway. "Holy shit, he made good time in Friday night traffic," she muttered aloud as she parked her Accord next to his new Civilian. Whitney thought that he might want to pounce on her as soon as she walked in, and that more time since her illicit afternoon sex might be helpful. She thought, perhaps a preemptive offer of a nice holiday dinner might be a good idea. Joel was on pins and needles when he heard Whitney's car in the driveway. It would be the first time he would see her since he knew for sure she was a cheating whore. Bags packed and in the car, a note prepared, all he needed was a pen to write it down. He sat in the living room to catch Whitney as soon as she arrived. "Hi, honey," Whitney exclaimed as she walked in and saw Joel rising from his chair. "I guess that went well. Why don't we go out to eat and celebrate?" she asked him as they hugged and kissed each other. "That sounds great, since I got home early. Why don't you go upstairs and change and I'll make a reservation?" Joel suggested. Whitney readily agreed and tossed her work bag and purse on the table and walked up the stairs to the master bedroom. Joel waited until he heard the shower start and then went to her purse and pulled out a pen. He pressed rewind and then play, heard the beginning of the lovers' conversation, and quickly turned off the pen. "Well, that settles it. It's time to get out of here," and Joel took out his note for Whitney and left it on the table next to her bags. Stopping at the doorway, Joel looked back at their house, sadly aware that nothing would ever be the same between him and her. Whitney hurried into the shower, concentrating again on brushing her pussy, and dressed quickly, going downstairs with her ponytail still wet. She surmised that he was probably hungry after the trip and also probably wanted to have sex later. Not seeing him in the living room, she headed into the kitchen and saw a note lying on the table. Picking it up and starting to read it, she aghast. "No, God, no. This can't be happening. Whitney. I know about your lover and your affair. I couldn't believe it was true, but your afternoon date at the motel dispelled all doubts. You crushed my soul, and I'm so sad and angry that I can't be around you or your cum-filled cunt right now. I'll be gone for a night or two while I try to get my thoughts together and then I'll call you to arrange a time for us to talk. Do not try to contact me or find me. Trust me when I say I do not have to see you until I am ready. Joel." Joel left the house and drove to the hotel. Once settled in his room, he dined downstairs, ordered a double scotch on the rocks, and then reluctantly returned to his room to listen to a recording of Whitney's afternoon betrayal of their marriage vows. Settling in a chair by the desk, he turned on the recorder and heard the following sound as Whitney entered the room. "Whitney, hi, Rob. I can't believe we're already done with this case. Both in meetings and in time. I didn't think we'd get through at least 5 meetings so easily, and still within 30 days. Rob, hi, Whitney. Yeah, I thought it would take longer. We spent a lot more time planning and preparing than we did executing. I guess that's the result of good planning, huh? I suppose. I have to say, I'm glad it's over. The stress of hiding our affair is taking its toll on me, and I understand why long-term affairs usually lead to a disastrous outcome. Yes, it's the same here. I know my wife has no idea, but I can see how it could easily end over time. You said Joel would be out of town until late tonight, right? I was thinking we could go out for a 2-for-1 drink tonight to celebrate our success and end with a bang, so to speak. Ha, ha. That was pretty lame, Rob. I'm kind of all for it, but rules are rules, so we're not doing anything new that wasn't on the list. Whitney and Rob undressed, and Joel heard kisses and soft moans coming from Whitney. That's nice, Rob. Oh, it feels so good. That's it, oh. Coming. Joel heard the creaking of the bed, and then, my turn. Okay, give me that cock. I want it nice and hard in the first round. Oh, this is going to be hard. My wife hasn't been allowed to have sex yet since the baby was born. Your tongue feels great. Joel listened to the entire 90 minutes of illicit sex between Whitney and Rob. 2 things struck him. First, the sex seemed normal, even casual, and Joel could not imagine why Whitney would risk her marriage for the same thing. Rob used condoms during intercourse, and nothing they did was outlandishly erotic. And, secondly, neither of them were humiliating or denigrating their spouses at all. Joel knew the affair was real, they had met 5 times, but he still had no idea of the why behind it. Friday night was mostly sleepless for both Joel and Whitney. Eventually Joel gave up and realized there was nothing more to be gained from the tape. Deciding to take advantage of the weekend and his freedom from work, he texted Whitney, "I'll stop by your house at 11 a.m. to talk, if that's okay with you." Whitney grabbed her phone when she heard the ping of the incoming message. "Yes. Please come home. I'm so sorry I hurt you." Joel paid no attention to Whitney's answer. Arriving just before 11 a.m., Joel dragged himself to the front door and rang the doorbell. Whitney opened the door. "Joel, you don't have to call at your own house." "I wasn't comfortable just walking in," Joel replied. "Can we sit at the kitchen table and discuss next steps?" Whitney was unhappy with Joel's businesslike demeanor and the way this discussion was developing. Sitting across the table from each other, time stood still for a moment, and then Joel cleared his throat and asked a question that shook Whitney to her core. "Do you deny in any meaningful way the facts that I found out about your activities with Rob?" Whitney wept and thought of Joel's question and how focused and businesslike he was. This conversation, she thought, must have been intended to make Joel realize that nothing she had done had changed her feelings for him, and that she and Rob were having this affair only to prove her coworkers wrong. Joel knew only about the meaningless sex and nothing about the conversations at Whitney's work that led to Rob and Whitney's plan to prove their friends wrong. "Joel, before we go any further, you must first realize that Rob and I only did this to prove that we could be having an affair and no one would know about it. A few months ago, many of us at work were discussing affairs and how they are almost always discovered, as well as the tragic upheaval they cause in marriages. The discussion split into 2 camps. Some thought that all affairs beyond a one-night stand were bound to be revealed. Others thought that keeping something more than a one-night stand a secret would require some planning and certainly a fair amount of deception, but it could be done. Rob and I ended up in the last camp and then talked about what precautions would be necessary." "Wait a second. Are you saying this was just an experiment or a game? Just to see if you could have an affair that would go unnoticed?" "Yeah, that's basically it. Just talking about it turned into a game. The hypotheses that we laid out over a few lunches just took on a life of their own, and we ended up laying it all out in quite some detail, and we were convinced that we could make it happen. But that was the sticking point. To truly succeed, it would mean so that no soul can to know what we had accomplished. In short, we decided to test our plan, fully aware that Rob loved his wife as much as I loved you, and that this game, if you will, meant nothing as far as our relationship was concerned. It was just sex, and one of our conditions for the test was that it had to last at least 30 days and we had to meet at least 5 times. But it was just sex, Joel. We don't love each other at all, we love our spouses. We purposefully didn't do anything sexual that we didn't share with our partners, and it never took anything away from our spouses. What do you mean didn't take anything from me? I used to have a faithful wife, and now she's gone. Yes, I suppose that's true now that you know. But if you had never known it, you would have believed me faithful. In my heart it was meaningless sex. And during that whole month, if you wanted sex after Rob and I were together, I never turned you down. That's great, Whitney. Sloppy seconds and no harm done. I feel really warm and fuzzy now. Look, I know you're hurt, and you must feel terrible about what you heard, and I'm truly sorry I hurt you. But I hope that the details I've shared may dispel any doubts about my love for you and erase any thoughts about my feelings for Rob. He's just a coworker I had sex with, but that's all it was. Just sex. No love, no feelings. It's only because you know it's a terrible thing right now. Rob and we were very careful, and we were sure we would never be discovered, and we would never think it would do any harm to our marriages. Okay, so it's a long story to basically admit that you cheated on me for a month, fucked a man other than your husband about 5 times, and fully intended to keep the affair a secret from me, your husband, for the rest of our lives together. Back to my main question. I assume you don't deny any of the disgusting facts that I found out about your activities with Rob? Whitney sank a little from the repeated direct attack on her excuses. Yes, I suppose the facts are what they are. But the reasons for them must matter. It was just sex. And it wasn't even sex born of attraction to each other. There was no lust between us. We just needed sex to prove that we could hide the affair. Sex was meaningless to either of us. Joel was torn between thinking that Whitney must have swallowed a bottle of stupid pills last month and wondering if she had always held such crazy beliefs. I do believe that subtle part of your bullshit. There doesn't seem to be much passion between the two of you. Exactly, Joel. There was no passion. It was just sex. I know you're hurting, but I'm willing to do anything to make it up to you. Wait, that's still bullshit. This whole, it was just sex, excuse is nonsense, and you should know that very well. We talked about being faithful when we decided to be exclusive. We discussed it at length when we talked about marriage. We dated exclusively for almost a year, and we talked again before I proposed. We specifically pledged fidelity to each other during pre-wedding counseling and in our damn wedding vows. I don't recall a single mention of the elopement, it was just sex. Whitney saw that arguing with their story was pointless. Joel, you're right. We did discuss fidelity at length. The point I'm trying to make is that we're on the same page where it matters, meaning our love for each other. I've loved only you for the last 7+ years and I haven't felt the slightest bit for Rob. If playing Yahtzee with Rob 5 times in a month could have mattered, we would have. It was just sex, but sex was necessary to pull off a secret affair. It was more like it was all the fault of the stupid pills, and then Joel seized on what Whitney had just said. So why didn't you just play Yahtzee? Or should you have just played backgammon? Or just do some other goddamn thing other than just sex? You clearly said you didn't have to have sex with Rob. And you also said that no other soul would ever know about the affair, so you could do something else in that hotel room and it would look and smell like an affair. Mission accomplished, right? You didn't really need to have sex to prove that you were capable of having an affair. You still needed to hide your activities from your spouses, so there was some guilt in that. You were leaving work early anyway, so you'd still have to hide it, really didn't care if it was with or without sex. Whitney's head tilted sideways as she pondered Joel's challenge, and she felt herself sinking fast and deep. Whitney could think of no other excuse to overcome his assumption. Since no one would ever know, it didn't really matter if Rob and Whitney had sex or not. To win their little unannounced bet, they just had to play out the affair with all the necessary secrecy and hotel meetings. So why was she actually having sex? I don't know, Joel. I never thought about that aspect of secrecy. We were planning a secret affair to see if we could do it. Then we decided to test our plan. It was just assumed that we would go all the way to the end. Whitney, all day today you've been using the word just to minimize what you've done, like saying just a second or just a little, when in fact what you've done is seriously damaging, and it's the worst thing either of us could have done to our marriage. The fact that you don't see it yourself is probably worse than you fucking another man 5 times in a month. Hell, you almost feel like you've fucked him all 5 times, so it's no big deal. Well, it's a big deal to me, and at this point we're getting nowhere, so I'm leaving for now. Joel left, returning to the hotel. On Monday, he cancelled work and began to consider Whitney's arguments. He couldn't believe that she thought so little of her fidelity that she cast it aside to win a phantom bet against fellow employees who knew nothing. It was all a game to her. I've had enough, Joel thought to himself. I could sit here and agonize and try to find some explanation for her actions, but there was none. This was not just sex. It was a betrayal of her commitment to him, her precious vows to keep that commitment to him forever, until death do us part. What ultimately struck Joel most was that no matter how terrible his final decision was, he felt surprisingly at ease with it. He felt better than he had ever felt since he got that damn email. Not giving up hope, Whitney readily agreed to another meeting the next day. What's this? Whitney asked, quickly going through the stack of papers. It's just divorce, Joel replied. Thanks for watching. And don't forget to rate the video and leave your comment.